Who owns music? The composer? The performer? The distributor? As we travel through history, the technology used to transmit music changes, each disrupting its predecessor, though not always replacing it entirely. And with each technological change, our understanding of how we can use or reuse musical ideas changes too. Once a musical tradition encouraged through generations of music education, the reuse of musical ideas is challenged with the advent of digital technologies and copyright law. I'm Emily Chambers, and in this series we'll explore an exhibition about Beethoven at the British Library, which took place between December 2021 and April 2022. In this video, we'll consider how Beethoven reused musical ideas, discover how this was received in the early 19th century, and learn how we reuse Beethoven's musical ideas today. Musical reuse can occur in different ways, taking place within a musical work, across multiple compositions, and musical ideas can be passed between composers. These aspects of musical reuse are reflected in the exhibition about Beethoven at the British Library. The manuscripts and other primary sources demonstrate how Beethoven quoted or built on the musical ideas of other composers, reused his own musical ideas in different works, and how his legacy has led to the reuse of his musical ideas for different purposes. In most musical works of any genre or period, musical ideas are repeated or reused as a means of organising sound, creating cohesion and meaning for the listener. Melodies, motifs, and rhythm might be reused for this purpose throughout a composition. Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is a well-known example, where a melodic and rhythmic motif is repeated exactly and with variation throughout each movement and across the symphony. Nearly all music across different cultures and genres relies on repetition and variation to communicate musical ideas to its audience. Beethoven also reused his own melodies across different compositions. The choral fantasy of 1808 reuses and varies a melody first used in a song Beethoven wrote shortly after he arrived in Vienna in 1794 to 1795, which he later adapted as the famous Ode to Joy theme in the Ninth Symphony. This London edition of the score was published in 1810. We can see an example of how Beethoven quoted or built upon the musical ideas of other composers in his Battle Symphony, Wellington's Siege. This work quotes the melodies of well-known British and French songs, God Save the King, Rule Britannia, and Marlborough Has Left for the War. In doing this, Beethoven represents two countries through their national songs. Quoting from these in his own composition provides a clear indication to the audience of the programmatic element of music, with the music itself representing real-life events. By the end of the work, the quoted French national song, Marlborough Has Left for the War, is overcome by Rule Britannia with a triumphant God Save the King sounded to celebrate the British victory at the Battle of Vittoria. As well as quoting the melody of God Save the King and Rule Britannia in Wellington's Siege, Beethoven also went on to write two sets of variations based upon the melodies in 1802 to 1803. Here we see a sketchbook which shows Beethoven developing ideas for several compositions at the same time. This includes part of the melody of God Save the King. These variations demonstrate how Beethoven not only quoted from existing melodies, but also developed these to create new melodic material. In addition to quoting well-known melodies, Beethoven explored George Thomson's collections of English, Scottish, Welsh and Irish folk songs, and set 179 of these, much to the delight of his English and Viennese audiences. However, publications of these musical scores did not sell well, as the arrangements were considered too complex for the general public to perform. Here we see sketches of 3 Scottish folk tunes in 1818, The Cottage Maid, Of Noble Stock Was Shinking, and The Last Rose of Summer. The exhibition also shows the influence of other composers on Beethoven's work. Here we see a nuanced means of musical reuse. The influence of Joseph Haydn, whom Beethoven would study with when he moved to Vienna in the early 1790s, can be seen in the earliest known draft of a symphonic movement by Beethoven. The exhibition label dates this fragment in C minor from 1788 or 1789, when Beethoven was working in the court of Maximilian France as a viola player. It acknowledges that Haydn's music would have been widely circulated at the time, and therefore likely to have been seen by Beethoven. This demonstrates the influence of Beethoven's contemporaries working in Vienna at the time. Mozart, also a resident of Vienna, died at the age of 36 during the same year Beethoven relocated to Vienna. It is not known if the two met. However, Beethoven had visited Vienna in 1787 when he was 16. The influence of Mozart's work in the cantata for the coronation of Leopold II in 1790 is confirmed by Beethoven's own hand. For at the bottom of the score, Beethoven writes, "This whole passage is stolen from the Mozart Symphony in E-flat." This would be a gift for today's copyright lawyers. But this raises an important consideration for our attitude towards musical reuse today, and how this might influence composers and the musical choices they make. What music will remain uncomposed due to an overly stringent approach to reuse and fear of legal repercussions? How was Beethoven's reuse of musical ideas received in the 19th century? We've already seen that Beethoven's setting of folk songs was well received by audiences, but not by amateur performers who considered the works too complex to perform, contributing to the commercial failure of publication of the musical scores. Wellington's Siege, immensely popular with audiences and one of Beethoven's most significant commercial successes, was less well received by critics, being regarded as the use of art for merely social and political function. Of interest with regards to this work is that whilst generally musical reuse, and particularly reuse amongst composers, was far more acceptable to a 19th century audience, encouraged through music education, but also due to its mode of transmission, performed live with limited access to the concert hall, salon and musical scores, authorship of Wellington's Siege was challenged by Johann Nepomuk Melzel, inventor of the metronome. This was not challenged because of quotations from well-known British and French national songs, but as Ignace Michelis describes in annotations to an 1841 biography on Beethoven, not only did Melzel decidedly induce Beethoven to write it, but even laid before him the whole design of it, himself wrote all the drum marches and trumpet flourishes of the French and English armies, gave the composer some hints how he should herald the English army by the tune of Rule Britannia, how he should introduce Marlborough in a dismal strain, how he should depict the horrors of the battle and arrange God Save the King with effects representing the hurrahs of a multitude. Even the unhappy idea of converting the melody of God Save the King into a subject of a fugue in quick movement emanates from Melzel. Beethoven disputed these accusations, stating, "It is to be noted that the original idea for the work on Wellington was mine, and previously I had already hit on the idea of a battle, which, however, could not have been used for his panharmonicon." This demonstrates that copyright claims are not restricted to the 20th or 21st centuries, where audio recording technology enables the capturing of a music composition and transmission to a much wider audience. Beethoven's music has been reused in many contexts since it was first performed, and the exhibition displays one source which shows an interesting reuse of the famous motif from the Fifth Symphony. The rhythm of the motif, which can be interpreted in Morse code as the letter V, 3 dots and a dash, is used here in a wartime song broadcast by the BBC to Nazi-occupied France in support of the resistance. Listening to the song, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is easily recognisable. This demonstrates the impact of Beethoven's music and its continued relevancy in diverse musical, social and political contexts today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit the like button and to subscribe and click the bell to receive notifications about future videos in the series.